Hello, I'm Bora Kazmirci, and today I'm going to be talking about the 3 keys to negotiating success. Now, when you start getting involved in negotiation, the first thing that I'm going to ask that you keep an eye on is when you're negotiating. I mean, let's take a look at a normal sales cycle. Normally, salespeople do not begin negotiating until they get to the end of the sales cycle, but by then, it's too late. When we talk about negotiating, actually what I mean is this concept called quid pro quo, which is this for that. Now, when you begin negotiating as a quid pro quo, it in fact begins at the beginning of the sales cycle. I mean, when you think about it in those terms, anytime the customer asks for something, we always want to get something back. Now, another concept that comes in with this quid pro quo, and if we begin it early, is the stature we have in front of the customer. Now, this is not just in the customer's mind. This is also in our own mind. I mean, looking at these 2 individuals, one of them is the customer, one of them is the sales cycle. Most people will say that the big one is the customer. When asked why, it's pretty simple. Because they've got the money and we want it. Now, if you see the customer as all-powerful in a negotiation because they have the money and we want it, I've got to tell you right now, you're setting yourself up for failure. Because we do bring things to the table. We bring things like value. Value is the great equalizer in what we do. If you don't believe that you bring your customers value, now is the point where I have to get very candid and suggest that you might want to find a new line of work. Now, in terms of quid pro quo, I want you to think about some of the things your customers ask for. I mean, customers ask for, demos, they ask to talk to references, they need price concessions, they also ask you to give them some free samples. If you give the customer something that they ask for, and I'm not saying not to give them what they ask for, but if you give them what they ask for and do not get anything in return, what is the value that the customer places on what you've given them if they have not given you anything back? The answer is 0. You don't have time to execute moves that do not bring your customer value and, more importantly, do not help you advance the sales cycle. So when the customer asks for something for a reference, well, of course we're going to give them the reference. But if I give you a reference, will you introduce me to your CIO, to your CFO, to your VP of sales? Now, this is not something you can wing. You can't just guesswork at this. So my suggestion is to be prepared when you go into these conversations with the customer. What's the customer potentially going to ask for? What are you going to get from them? What are they going to ask for? What are you going to get for it? Now, with the gives, the things that you give the customer, I think it's critical to understand the specific value of what you're doing right there. Now, the third step is to be willing to walk away. Now, this is probably one of the single most difficult moves in negotiating. In fact, if you go into a negotiation and you're not willing or able to walk away from that deal, it means you're desperate. I mean, you go into a negotiation and wearing that cologne we call desperation, man, your customer is going to smell it on you and they will make you pay every single time. Now, to be able to make this move of walking away, the seller always has to overcome the emotional hurdle first. Now, the emotional hurdle that I'm talking about is the ability to walk away. Think about poker as a game. In a hand of poker, not an all-night game, a single hand of poker, the winner is the one, when the cards are laid out, that wins all the money, that pulls the money off of the table. Now, who comes in second place in a hand of poker? It's the one that got out of the game first. In essence, the one that lost the least amount of money. And you also ask yourself, who's the big loser? Well, the big loser is the one that called and lost. That is the emotional hurdle that we talk about here. Is you've gone through all of the steps, you've done all of the work, you've spent all the time and company money, and you're having to walk away. Look, I'd much rather you walk away from a bad deal than sign it and make it even worse. I mean, we've all signed the deal that later became the deal from hell. Well, the scary thing about that is you knew it was going to be the deal from hell as you were working through it, but you signed it anyway just to get you up over that number. Now, the third point with willing to walk away is to know when the negotiation begins, never giving without getting, and the ability to get out if things are not going well. Thank you very much. Again, Bora Kazmirci with Sales Performance International.